In conclusion, you really need to pray for your God ordained spouse, because some of them, my feeling is now they are starting to deal with themselves. The word that I released, by the time you see this, it'll probably be about 2-3 weeks. That there are, what's the word? 2-3 weeks ago, I released something that I talked about. And it's funny, I was wearing the same shirt in it. I talk about that the Lord is sweating out their confusion. Your God-ordained spouse has been going through a purging and a cleansing and a clarification of their own, where a lot of things are being brought up to the surface that let them understand how they ended up in the mess that they ended up in. God's really been showing them, because you can't deliver a person without showing them where the issue came from. A lot of the deliverances that I went through, I had to go back to my childhood issues and recognize moments in time that were the stem that rooted the issue in the first place. And that's what they've been going through. Because once you break the stem or the root, that person no longer has hold. And I believe that a lot of these men have literally been breaking off the soul ties, but they couldn't break the soul tie till they dealt with the strong man and use an axe to cut the head off of the strong man. And the strong man was that childhood entry of the devil through the spirit of Leviathan, through the spirit of pride, through the spirit of abuse. Leviathan uses words to bring about confusion, meaning the Leviathan will use words to coddle you but then turn around and use the same words to abuse you. It's a spirit of confusion is what Leviathan is. Then having pride combined with that Jezebelic narcissistic spirit, and I'm recently finding that the spirit of Baal as well, which is a person that is a victim narcissist, that they will play victim in order to get you to do what they want the person to do. And some of you God-ordained spouses had multiple counterfeits. They had a Jezebelic one that was trying to dominate over them, and then they had a submissive one that looked like it was submissive, but it was actually operating in the spirit of Baal, which is the victim narcissist. Then some of these things are coming to the forefront, coming to a head now. They're having to deal with those fears, deal with those generational curses. You got to pray for them. Help them get the clarity they need. Help them to release the things that were toxic so that they can handle and deal with the triggers. So when they're in a relationship with you, and just because maybe you're hormonal and you're pregnant, you raise your voice because you were just like, I'm having a bad day today. They aren't triggered and jumping at you, and you said, what is wrong with you? I didn't do nothing. Memory, muscle memory. Or start pulling away from you, and you're trying to show them affection. You're trying to show them love. You're trying to show them caring. I was listening to a woman the other day, and the quote that she said in that is coming up to me. You gotta love the hell out of them. You're going to need to love this man through all that hell he's been through. They laid their heads in Delilah's lap, and Delilah abused her authority. They need to feel that they can lay their head in your lap and you're not going to do the same thing. Love should not hurt. And some of these men were hurt badly by toxic figureheads in their family. And it was a scenario of some of them, they may have had family members they could go to, but they could never stay with that person. Meaning, this person balanced them out, but they can't stay there because that person was not their mama, and their mama was going to come and get them regardless. But it kept them balanced to not lose themselves as a child and become off the radar, because they did have that other figure in their life. But whether it was an auntie, a sister, grandmama, elder female cousin, whatever female from the other side of the thing, that they could go to that wasn't being toxic, that they had a balance to balance out the toxicity, but they always ended up having to go back to the toxicity because that person was not. So they saw a kind figure, but because they were forced to live in that environment with someone that didn't. And some of these women became toxic because they didn't have the man in the house. Some of these women became toxic moms because they see the son looking like the father and they're abusing them. I remember I was sitting on a train one day. This was about almost 10 years ago. And the woman was on the phone with the boy's father, cussing the child's father out. The boy's sitting there on the train with her, and then gets off the phone with him, and the boy does something very minuscule. She darn near gave that boy whiplash as hard as she hit him. She was not mad at him. She was mad at what that father said to her. Sometimes it's what the mother went through that every time she looked at that boy, she saw their daddy. And she abused him for what the father did or didn't do. Because some of the fathers just weren't in the picture. Either they chose not to be, but with all these men that have been getting killed out here, some of them died. And they knew that that man loved them, but now that man's not there, so they abuse. And I'm going to take it even further. Anybody seen the movie Jump in the Broom? One of my favorite marriage movies. Remember how the mother was in that? Remember the reason why the boy never took her to his mama? Because the second she even got to the wedding, she's like, nah, I'm going to break this thing up. And then when he confronted her towards the end of the film, after she managed to temporarily break it up, he said, this is why I don't never bring nobody around you, because you keep trying to break it up. You treat me like either I'm your husband or I'm your child. Not a child no more. And I've never been your husband. Some of them have to confront that. Which brings me back to come on, guys. Prophetic Poetry did a video. And I just downloaded it onto my phone the other day. Because I looked at it before. And it's called He's Gonna Come to You Anyway. And it talked about the mama figure being the type that he's been giving all the love that he's supposed to give to you to his mama. So matter of factly, it's probably been a tandem situation where it's either the mama that's pulling or the counterfeit that's pulling. But they've come to the recognition of the trigger, and they ain't gonna let nobody pull no more, so that they can freely come to you. In that video, she was talking about they're coming to you anyway. Because when they come to that realization, oh, it was you all along. Oh, it was mama all along. And it's because mama did that to me, I never had a healthy relationship, because I was looking for her in all the men. I mean, all the women. And for you, it was the men. You were looking for daddy in all the men. And the men did the exact same thing your daddy did. Toxicity. All of this a level of toxicity. Do I know for certain that this is exactly what happened with my God Day spouse? I don't know for certain. But the fact that the revelation even came to me makes me wonder. Because all of the pieces are starting to fall into place in such a way. And sometimes we'll see all the pieces fall into place in such a way. We'll be like, no, it's not like that. Because then you'll be like, hold up. Does that mean I'm going to have to deal with a toxic mama or mother-in-law? Oh, Lord. Remember the movie with Jennifer Lopez and Jane Fonda? Monster-in-Law. I need to look that up and see if I can find it. Where it was the mother that kept trying to do everything to booby trap and sabotage the wedding. Because she's like, oh, this is not going to happen. So they've been dealing with a duality of these different types of women in their life. So maybe that's why they didn't come to you. Because one, they needed to see you as a blessing when they dealt with toxic dominance. So you really just need to pray for their boldness, for them to walk in the steps of the Lord. Pray for their confidence. Pray that when that spirit of fear, because we have triggers, disarming the triggers, that whatever the trigger is, or whatever it was that was being used to pull them away, over and over, I'm seeing the scene from Quantum Leap when the guy was trying to be pulled back in the midst of the leap. And he had to fight the leap. Some of them they're fighting not to be pulled back into that toxicity. Some of you, I guarantee you, raise your hand if you said you've been having melancholy visions. Melancholy is when you start to think about the past. Some of you are being pulled into visions, thoughts, even having dreams of past issues. It wasn't even an issue. It was the fact that you're being pulled back into past comfort zones with people that were toxic. That's what melancholy does. It pulls you back into the past, but makes you remember good, so that when the enemy sends this person back into your life, whether it's an ex, whether it's the mama, whether they start talking back with the kindness that they always did, but then their dark side always eventually emerges again. I had this happen to me growing up. Toxic parent. When the person wanted something, they would groom me for about 3-4 days. Call you 3 days in a row. Hey, how you doing? Everything good with you? And they know that you want that type of relationship with them. And you temporarily forget because they actually giving you what you want until they ask for what they want and you say, oh, no. Then they start wanting to cuss you out and argue with you again. And you're like, oh, there you go. Which brings me to what trust, obedience, and imagine ministries was talking about. She had an encounter with one of her male counterfeits. And this guy, he came at her smooth and nice like he always did. And she was in a moment of doubt about her kingdom spouse in that moment. Came at her smooth and nice. They talked for 2 days straight. And when this guy came in talking his smoothness, 11:11, came in talking his smoothness, then he starts to suggest something and she starts talking God. And when she comes with her God against this thing that the guy's talking about, she sees Leviathan raising his ugly head. She sees the twisting starting to happen. And she comes to the realization, if I let this person in the way they want to come in, they're going to kill me. This has been the problem with these God-ordained spouses. They've been in a fight to release the Jezebel that don't want to let go. But they're going to have to. Because when God steps in this situation to break the scenario down, God is either going to remove them that they no longer have access, or he just straightly going to kill them. And some people would think that's harsh. It's like, oh my God, why would God kill them? You don't know how many times God has been sitting on this person, just like he sat on you, some of y'all, when he first started trying to get you back to him, giving a warning after warning, trying to pull them in. They kept rejecting. They kept turning around and doing. Some of y'all been praying, please relinquish, please release, please renounce, denounce, and come out of alignment and agreement with whatever witchcraft that you're doing against my spouse. Because if you do not, God's going to come after you. For years, they've been doing this foolery, whether it be to your God-ordained spouse or other people. But you ever heard that saying, they messed around and ran into you? They messed around and ran into your God-ordained spouse, and because you were the one that was praying for them, oh ho ho ho. And they sat up there and thought that they witchcraft was going to stop you. No. Some of y'all started praying harder when you realized it was witchcraft. Oh, I serve a God that he invented fear. So let's see how God's fear makes you feel. Because your little parlor tricks and illusion ain't working. I want to see God show you what fear really looks like. And some of y'all can pray that. Lord, let them see what your fear look like. I bet you they never will. Come back at you. They'll flee from you in 7 different directions. They're like, oh my goodness. Remember in the word I said, Haman got the veil put over top of his face. Jezebel's daughter got taken away. Haman got taken away. Hung up on the gallows that he set up. They don't know true fear until they deal with God. So you just got to pray for your God-ordained spouse. Sometimes I would say pray mercy over your God-ordained spouse's counterfeit, but let the Lord lead you in that. Because for some of you, you have been praying mercifully over that person. You have been saying, please just renounce and denounce. Please just repent. Please just relinquish and stop. Because if you please will stop, God won't have to do what he is going to do to you. But they didn't listen. They didn't listen. And some of you, if you prayed mercy for them, God wasn't going to listen to you anyway in relation to them, because of the fact that he's like, yeah, I gave him every chance in the world for all the other prayers that you prayed for him. And now I'm going to have my wrath. Are we out here happy about wrath? I'm the type of person I feel bad. I feel bad for the perspective of the God ordained spouse. I feel bad. Because at the end of the day, the serpent's head gonna get cut off regardless. Leviathan got a spike through the chin. These people are going to get what's coming to them. And it's not a rejoicing moment. But as I said in Ezekiel, I believe it was 24, 21 through 20, 20 through 21, you are not to mourn them when this happens. Because God done gave them every chance. You done prayed every chance over their hearts. If they chose not to do anything, what God decides to do is God's decision. Your job is to pray for the heart of your spouse. Your job is to deal with them. And God's going to do what He's going to do in this situation because you've given all the prayers you can give to that person. You have. But if God says it's a wrap, not even your prayers are going to stop the judgment that's going to come to this person. Not no more. Remember in the MacGyver episode, when the doors were shut, he could not open them. No matter what he did. When God cuts the head off this serpent, pray for your spouse. Pray. Because it's a lot of healing that they're going to need to go through. A lot of releasing. A lot of letting go. And if your spouses are emotional people, there's going to be a lot of crying. And some of you need to get used to, not so much get used to, but you have to become accustomed to the fact that when they come to you, y'all might end up in several scenarios where he's crying on your shoulders. I saw a video by, there's a person, their name was Tana OX. And they said that when your husband comes to you, there will be tears. And I already know this because for me, I've seen this person cry before. And it don't take much. And it doesn't mean that they're weak. It just means that potentially at the time that they were brought to a level of tears. Some of the tears were brought on from the stress that they were dealing with. So it's an outward expression of the release of the stress in that moment. A lot of people say they're like, a man shouldn't cry. Let that man release whatever he needs to release. And you're going to need to be there. And you're not even going to need to judge them. The other women have judged them for being emotional. There's some people they could never be emotional with. Mainly that Jezebelic person that was operating in that dominance. Because then that's the one that's going to poke their finger in their face and say, no, you weak, you this, you this, you this, you this. And you're the one that's going to be like, come here, give me a hug. Hug. Let me hold you. Let me show you appreciation. Cry as long as you need to cry. Let me love up on you. Let me hug up on you. Let me make you your favorite dinner, because I know that was emotional for you. Come on. Now, my last thought is this: therapy. This is a tricky question because this is the thing with therapy. There are some people that have the belief as a Christian you're not supposed to have therapy because if you are fully and completely delivered from the issue, therapy wouldn't be necessary. Then there's the other set of people that believe, yes, therapy is necessary, but if you're going to a Christian therapist, that person at least is spiritually aligned with you that can teach you. And then other people are like, just go to therapy. Whoever. But I need you to think about it this way. If you're going to have a therapist come in, you need to pray about who that's going to be. And it's not because you're seeking somebody that's going to agree with you. You need to pray for somebody that's not going to be, that is spiritually aligned with you and your spouse if you're going to go to therapy together. Because if they're spiritually aligned, they are going to come from a space of honesty. Let me tell you something that happened to me when I was going to therapy. I was seeing a therapist early on my journey in my walk with God. But when I started to talk too much God to this person began to show evidence that they were operating in a different spirit. A spirit of, what is it? Those, you know how them black rebellious Jew types are? They wear the unks and all that kind of stuff. That's the type of spirit that this therapist had. I had to cut her loose because of the fact that she was challenging me in relation to my godly walk. You need somebody that if you're going to go to therapy, that this person is assigned to your marriage to cover your marriage, okay? That will be a balance for you. That they're walking in Christ just as you're walking in Christ. And thirdly, once they're coming in that realm, that the Lord is speaking through them. Meaning you're praying even before you go to your appointments with your spouse so that the truth of God will come out in the midst of that session and you will both feel safe. Because if the person is operating in the wrong spirit, that means you now have an authority speaking into your marriage that isn't operating in God and isn't operating in the wisdom of God, thereby is speaking confusion into the midst that could actually bring a wedge. And understand that these marriages the devil don't want. So it would be perfect for him to get a therapist directly between the two of you to turn you into two different directions. Because now you got this person giving you psychological and mental advice that could literally plant seeds to turn the two of you away from one another if they're not operating in the right spirit. Because a therapist doesn't always talk to the both of you. He talks to each one of you individually. And if the person ain't operating in the right spirit, they'll say one thing to your spouse when your spouse is with them and say another thing to you. And if you pick up on it, you're like, this person is operating in the wrong spirit. I've seen it happen several times to me. This is why I don't go to therapy. Because there was one therapist I had, but I separated myself from her, which was my fault during that season. And when I went back to her, once I came to God, she was leaving. I've had to rotate through. And sometimes in certain seasons, God will do that. You can't really become attached to an individual person. Sometimes God will do that because the person gets you what you need in that season, but they can't go with you into the next one. Okay? So I'm not saying don't go to therapy at all. But I pray that you get wisdom. There's a site called faith-based counseling. I think it's called faith-based counseling or faith counseling. That what's her name? I think her name is Melody or something on um YouTube suggested, and I filed for it, but it's a thing about you need to have an insurance, and insurance won't cover it, and you need to pay the. So that's what kept me from going into getting faith-based counseling, because I would have gone into faith-based counseling, to tell you the truth. But you need to make sure that that person is aligned and that you can afford it. So you're going to have to pray about those types of things. Do what you can spiritually, but some of them they need. And you got to pray that if they are seeking that the person that they come aligned with and is speaking into them is sent by God, not by the devil, to bring more confusion into your relationship. Because Leviathan is a person that speaks confusion into your life. So you know that the enemy would love to send somebody that is speaking into your God-ordained spouse's head that's going to make you look like the enemy. When they think they're coming to that person for help. So you really got to pray about that. So we're coming to the end of this. I didn't think I was going to be talking that long on this part. Maybe the Lord knew. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of this part. Pray for your spouses, because some of them got some deep-rooted issues that led the opening of the door for the other thing to happen. And it all stems back from a mama wound. But I'm going to also tell you this. Megan Michelle released in a word, she said, your spouses may have mama wounds, but you got to play carefully with that, because the one thing that a man will not tolerate is you talking about their mama. Even if their mama was like that. So you got to know your place, even if it's true. You can't about that. So know this and be cautious. So that's the end of this, and we're coming to the end of the video. But be cautious. A man is very protective of their mama, even the ones that were toxic. Be aware. I hope this whole thing blessed you and gave you a new perspective. Pray for your spouses. Really do pray, because the Lord just opened this up to me. So much love, faith, peace, and blessings to you. Until next.